A young woman wanders into a cursed cemetery, unaware that her life will never return to normal. From the moment she steps inside, a faceless phantom clings to her, chasing her through fog and stone, leaving her sleepless and trembling. Each night becomes heavier, her breath short and frantic, her mind worn thin by footsteps that never stop following. Just when she collapses under the weight of despair, the ghost reaches for her with icy hands. At that edge of ruin, a mysterious man appears, fearless against the shadow, becoming the single fragile hope that she might survive. My name is Hannah, a college student who should have been home studying instead of following a dare into the old cemetery outside Baton Rouge. Daniel insisted it would be a quick thrill, nothing more than cracked stones and broken statues. I let him pull me past the rusted gates, though every part of me screamed to turn back. The hinges moaned as the metal scraped, the sound sharp enough to rattle in my chest. The air was heavy with the smell of damp earth and rotting flowers, pressing into my lungs until I could hardly breathe. My short hair brushed against my glasses as I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting someone else to be behind us. I tried to laugh at my nerves, but the sound died almost instantly in the thick silence. Even the night insects had gone quiet. Daniel walked ahead, waving his flashlight over weathered angels and tilted crosses. He muttered about how the place looked older than the city itself, like time had forgotten it. I trailed behind, uneasy, running my fingers along the cracked edges of a marble slab just to ground myself. That was when I saw him. A tall figure stood where the fog gathered thickest, half hidden between two crooked mausoleums. His skin gleamed pale, smoother than wax, while his eyes were nothing but dark pits dripping with black streaks that stained the stone beneath him. Each breath he released spread a cold mist that clung to the air, frosting the tips of the grass. My stomach dropped. This was not some drunk squatter or prank. This was something that should not exist, and it was looking directly at me. The figure slid forward without sound, gliding in a way that made space collapse too quickly. My body froze, trapped between disbelief and dread. When I tried to call Daniel, the name caught sharp in my throat, swallowed whole by the fog before it carried. His arms reached toward me, unnaturally long, fingers thin like branches splintering under strain. I broke free from the paralysis and bolted, my shoes scraping against gravel, lungs tearing at the air. Daniel shouted from somewhere behind me, but the fog bent his voice, twisting it into something broken and unrecognizable. My legs pumped harder, yet the ground seemed to drag against me, each step heavier than the last. The presence closed in fast, brushing the back of my neck with air, so cold it cut like glass. I tripped hard over a fallen stone, crashing into the dirt. My palms burned from the scrape, but pain was nothing compared to the terror towering above me. The figure bent down, his waxy face inches from mine. Tears of black ran from his hollow eyes, falling in slow drops that sizzled against the earth like acid. The hiss filled my ears until it was all I could hear. I curled back against the slab, certain that this was the moment I would be dragged into whatever void stared out from his eyes. Then the fog shifted, and through it came a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a long brown coat that swung with the wind. His face was steady, his eyes glowing faintly green, as if catching some hidden light. He stepped directly between me and the ghost, planting his boots firm in the dirt, as though the cold had no power over him. The phantom paused, mist swirling violently, as if the stranger's very presence unsettled it. The phantom hissed low, its form twisting in agitation. For a moment I thought it would strike, but instead its body melted back, folding into the fog until only the dripping stain remained on the stone. Silence rushed in behind it, pressing heavy against my ears. Daniel appeared at my side, pale and shaking, his grip tight on my arm as though letting go would mean losing me. I stared at the man who had stepped from nowhere, his posture calm, gaze still locked on the shadows where the phantom had vanished. I wanted to ask who he was, why he had been there at that exact moment, but my mouth refused to shape the words. Then he turned, and in the blink of an eye he was gone, leaving only the faint shimmer of mist curling where he had stood. The cemetery was quiet again, yet every nerve in me knew the night had only marked the beginning. That presence had tasted my fear, and it would not let me go so easily. Hannah's life remained haunted long after the cemetery, every shadow in her apartment stirring uneasily, as if alive. Sleep eluded her, and each night the faceless phantom returned, pressing closer with chilling persistence. Her body weakened from constant fear, her mind fraying under the relentless presence that followed her through halls and dreams alike. When the ghost reached out with icy, threatening hands, a mysterious man appeared, standing between her and the darkness. His calm, protective presence offered the only hope she had, transforming her terror into a fragile sense of safety and proving that even in relentless pursuit, a guardian could emerge to break the nightmare. Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that the cemetery had followed her home. Days passed, but every shadow in her apartment seemed to move on its own. Her textbooks lay open on the desk, forgotten, and she spent hours pacing the narrow spaces between walls, listening to the creak of the floorboards. Even the sunlight through the blinds did little to ease the chill that clung to her skin. At night, her dreams were haunted by the same faceless figure from the graveyard, moving closer with every heartbeat. She rubbed her short hair back and blinked against the tears, trying to convince herself it was only her imagination. Daniel called constantly, insisting she stay with him for a night or two. She agreed reluctantly, grateful for another human presence. In his living room, the air was thick, and shadows stretched across the corners, twisting unnaturally. The phantom appeared again, darker than before, its black eyes pressing through the dim light. Hannah froze in the doorway, heart pounding, while Daniel held her hand, grounding her. Before it could reach her, the mysterious man from the cemetery appeared at the threshold, his tall figure cutting through the gloom. He stood silently, green eyes flickering, and the shadow hesitated, unsure. Hannah ran across the room, tripping over a rug, the phantom close enough to brush her shoulder with its icy presence. The man stepped quickly, positioning himself between her and the ghost. His stance was calm, but his gaze never wavered. Daniel watched in awe, unsure whether to intervene or stay back. Hannah's breath came in ragged gasps, short and uneven, as if the air itself had become heavy. The figure hissed, black mist curling around the legs of the furniture, reaching out like liquid. Hannah clutched Daniel's arm, squeezing until her knuckles burned, feeling herself teeter on the edge of panic and relief. They moved together through the apartment, Hannah and Daniel cautiously stepping into every shadowed corner, the man guiding them with quiet authority. The phantom followed, slinking along walls and ceilings, its presence chilling the air. A window rattled in its frame, dust swirling like smoke, yet the man's figure remained steady. Hannah noticed small movements in the ghost she hadn't before. A pause at the lamp, a hesitation near the bookshelf, hints that it was wary of him. Even Daniel seemed to sense it, his usually skeptical eyes wide with disbelief. The apartment felt transformed, the ordinary spaces now battlegrounds of unseen forces. Hours passed as they maneuvered through the rooms, every corner threatening sudden contact. Hannah's heart raced, her muscles tense, yet the man remained a protective presence, blocking shadows and guiding her. The phantom recoiled at intervals, twisting into thick fog, only to reform closer each time they paused. Finally, it withdrew, melting into the floorboards and walls, leaving an eerie silence that pressed into Hannah's chest. The man turned toward her, expression calm yet sad, as if he understood more than he would ever explain. Daniel reached out, brushing her hair back gently, and Hannah realized she had survived another night, her trust in this mysterious protector cemented. The following morning, sunlight fell weakly across the floor, and the apartment seemed ordinary again. Hannah stayed alert, knowing the phantom's presence was only dormant, not gone. Daniel brewed coffee, the aroma filling the space, offering a small comfort against lingering dread. The man's figure lingered near the door, vanishing slowly into the morning light, a reminder that danger and protection coexisted invisibly. Hannah sank into a chair, exhaustion pressing into every bone. Yet there was relief too. She had endured, survived the unseen chase, and learned that sometimes hope arrived in forms she could not explain, standing silently between her and the dark. Hannah spent the day replaying every moment, each heartbeat, each breath, trying to map the encounter into something understandable. She knew she would not forget the hollow eyes or the icy mist, nor the sense of protection from the man whose presence had changed everything. Daniel's quiet support reminded her of human bonds that mattered, grounding her when fear threatened to consume her. By evening, she felt a cautious calm, an understanding that her life had shifted but was not broken. Somewhere, beyond the ordinary, forces of darkness and guardianship coexisted, and she had been allowed a glimpse of both. Hannah had convinced herself that leaving the apartment for a walk would clear her mind, but the streets felt different, somehow darker than she remembered. The cemetery's presence lingered, twisting the air around the lamplights, and even the evening breeze seemed to carry whispers. She clutched her jacket tighter, scanning each shadow as if it could spring to life. Daniel walked beside her, steady and protective, but his usual reassurances felt small against the weight of the unseen. The faceless phantom emerged again, hovering near the alley, stretching impossibly tall, its dark, misty form swallowing the corners. Hannah froze, heart tightening, and Daniel grabbed her wrist gently, urging her forward. The man from the cemetery appeared without warning, stepping through the fog like he belonged there. His eyes glimmered softly in the dim light, his posture firm yet calm. The phantom recoiled slightly, as if sensing something stronger than itself, and Hannah felt a flicker of hope. They moved slowly down the narrow streets, every step measured, the air tense and heavy. Nearby, a young woman, Emily, passed with her dog, and the presence of another human briefly eased the tension. Yet the phantom lingered, shadowing each turn, always near enough to make Hannah's pulse race. They ducked into an old park, its swings creaking in the wind and leaves swirling across the paths. The man guided Hannah behind a thick oak, shielding her as the phantom drifted past, its form wavering and restless. Hannah could feel the cold tendrils brushing her hair, her own skin prickling with the phantom's icy presence. Daniel whispered reassurances, but she hardly heard, focusing on the man who had become a strange anchor, a protective force in the endless night. The phantom circled them, testing their resolve, its unblinking black eyes watching their every movement. Hannah's breaths came faster, each inhale shallow, as if the air itself had grown heavy. She realized she was trembling, not from the cold, but from fear that had deepened over the past nights. The man raised his hands, not threatening but commanding, and the phantom paused, hesitated, then retreated into the darker stretches of the park. Hannah clung to Daniel, relief and exhaustion warring inside her. The man's gaze lingered on her for a moment, silent but steady, before he disappeared again, leaving behind only the faint shimmer of his presence. They walked slowly back to the streets, each shadow now a potential threat. Emily waved goodbye, unaware of the danger that had brushed so close. Hannah felt a strange clarity, as if surviving this encounter had altered something inside her. She realized fear was no longer only terror, but awareness, a sharp sense of her own instincts and limits. The phantom had not been vanquished, only held at bay. Yet the experience had strengthened her in ways she could not yet name. Daniel's presence grounded her, a reminder that even amidst darkness, connection mattered. By the time they reached the small bridge near the river, the city's lights flickered and reflected across the water, painting the scene with soft golds and muted shadows. Hannah looked over her shoulder, expecting the phantom, but only the faint wind moved the leaves. The man's presence lingered in memory, a reassurance that protection could exist beyond explanation. Hannah's shoulders relaxed, her pulse slowing, and she realized that survival was as much about courage as it was about escape. The night had been long, and though the shadow still waited somewhere, she had walked through it and emerged with a sharper understanding of herself and the strange forces that inhabited her world. As they reached her apartment, Hannah paused at the doorway, glancing back at the empty streets. The phantom was gone for now, and yet she felt its memory like a cold weight on her chest. Daniel squeezed her hand gently, and she returned the gesture, feeling the warmth of something real and steady. Hannah knew the nights ahead might bring more encounters, but she had learned to move through them with alertness and care. The experience had left a mark, but it had also left a lesson. Even in the presence of relentless shadows, trust and courage could carve a path through fear. She stepped inside, the door closing softly behind her, carrying the knowledge that she was no longer completely alone in facing the darkness. Hannah hadn't planned to return to the cemetery, but curiosity and the restless feeling that had settled in her chest led her back one gray afternoon. The fog lay thick over the cracked stones, curling around the names etched in stone. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest, as if the air itself remembered her presence. Daniel stayed close, his hand brushing hers in a quiet reassurance, while Emily followed at a cautious distance, her dog tugging lightly on its leash. The cemetery seemed quieter than before, but shadows stretched unnaturally, folding over the graves like dark waves. A figure emerged from between two leaning headstones, a man-shaped phantom with hollow eyes that seemed to absorb the dim light. Hannah froze, feeling the icy pressure of its presence before she could think. Daniel positioned himself in front, a solid wall of determination, his gaze fixed and unwavering. Emily whispered something to her dog, but Hannah barely registered the words, her pulse beating loudly in her ears. The phantom drifted closer, its form flickering like smoke caught in a gust of wind, and Hannah could feel the hairs on her neck rise with awareness. Hannah tried to take a step back, but the ground was uneven and the gravel shifted beneath her feet. The phantom's form pulsed, stretching tall and thin, its dark mist reaching toward her, and for a moment, panic surged through her. Then the man from before appeared, stepping through the fog without sound. His eyes were steady, glowing faintly in the gloom, and his presence seemed to anchor the chaos around them. The phantom hesitated, recoiling slightly, and Hannah felt a spark of relief. She realized the man's arrival had changed everything, offering a chance to confront the fear rather than run from it. They moved cautiously between the stones, Hannah gripping Daniel's sleeve while the man led the way, guiding them through twists and hidden paths. The fog curled and shifted, revealing the outlines of graves that seemed to lean toward them. Yet the group pressed on, alert and deliberate. The phantom followed, lingering at the edges of perception, testing boundaries and drifting with a slow, deliberate malice. Hannah's breaths came in short bursts, each one a reminder of her frailty and her resolve. Emily stayed close, quietly observing, providing a grounding normality amidst the surreal tension that surrounded them. They reached an old mausoleum, its doors cracked and weathered, a place Hannah had never noticed before. The man gestured for them to stay behind him as he stepped forward, the phantom pausing outside the threshold. The fog thickened, swirling around the entrance like a living thing, yet the man's calm focus kept it at bay. Hannah realized the confrontation was not about defeating the phantom, but about standing firm in the face of it, acknowledging its presence without surrender. Daniel squeezed her hand, silently urging courage, and she felt strength returning, slow but certain. Inside the mausoleum, the air was cold and heavy, dust motes drifting in the fading light. Shadows twisted along the walls, and Hannah could sense the phantom pressing just beyond the doorway. The man's presence radiated assurance, his calm energy forming an invisible shield, while Daniel and Emily offered tangible support through their proximity. Hannah felt her fear gradually give way to alert awareness, her senses sharpening with every measured step. They paused briefly, breathing together, the silence stretching and compressing as if time itself had slowed. As they emerged, the fog began to lift, revealing the cemetery in its raw, quiet expanse. The phantom had retreated, its presence lingering only as a cold memory. Hannah felt the weight of the encounter settle, leaving a mixture of exhaustion and clarity. She realized survival was not just about escaping danger, but about recognizing allies, trusting instincts, and moving with careful intent. Emily patted her dog, who wagged its tail tentatively, and Hannah allowed herself a quiet smile. Daniel's steady presence reminded her that even in places that tested fear, connection, and courage mattered. By the time they left the cemetery, the sun had dipped lower, painting the stones in soft golds and muted shadows. Hannah's steps were slower, thoughtful, each one a measured return to normalcy. She understood that the phantom might linger, unseen yet present, but she felt prepared to face it, armed not with weapons, but with awareness and trust in those around her. The man's form faded into memory, leaving a lasting impression of protection and quiet strength. Hannah walked on with a new understanding of herself, the fragile balance between fear and resilience now etched into her every step. Hannah had never planned to wander into the old warehouse district, but a mix of curiosity and restlessness drew her down the narrow streets. Broken windows reflected the gray sky above, and the quiet hum of the city seemed to fade the closer she got to the abandoned buildings. Daniel walked beside her, his presence calming, while Emily trailed behind, occasionally glancing over her shoulder. The wind carried a faint scent of rust and dust, and the first building they entered had peeling paint and a floor littered with debris. Shadows gathered in corners, forming shapes that seemed to move just beyond her vision. Hannah's footsteps echoed as she navigated through the open space, her senses sharp, heart racing, but focused. Daniel stayed near, scanning every darkened doorway, while Emily's voice, quiet and tentative, marked her concern. Then she saw it, a figure at the far end of the room, faint and indistinct, its presence heavy and deliberate. Hannah froze, sensing a pulse of energy that seemed both alive and watchful. As they moved closer, the figure shifted slightly, not aggressive but insistent, a reminder that they were not alone. Hannah's instinct urged caution, yet she felt a pull, a need to understand what drew this attention. Daniel placed a steady hand on her shoulder, grounding her as they approached the center of the warehouse. Emily stayed alert, her dog quietly observing, ears perked to every subtle sound. The figure's edges shimmered, its form flickering, almost inviting them to follow. Hannah took a slow step, her mind alternating between curiosity and fear, a tight knot of tension in her chest. The group followed the figure to a staircase leading to the second floor. The boards creaked underfoot, each step a reminder of the precariousness of their exploration. Light from the broken windows above cast long shadows that seemed to reach toward them, stretching and bending with every movement. Hannah's pulse accelerated, yet the strange calmness from the man they had met before filled her with a strange sense of protection. Daniel whispered instructions to stay close, Emily echoing the reminders quietly, and together they moved cautiously, attuned to the subtle shifts around them. On the second floor, the figure paused beside a large boarded-up window, a thin ray of daylight illuminating dust in the air. Hannah noticed markings on the walls, symbols etched faintly into the plaster, their meaning unclear, yet undeniably potent. The figure seemed to draw attention to them, moving with purpose, and Hannah realized that it was not malevolent, but a messenger, a force seeking acknowledgement. Daniel exchanged a glance with the man, whose steady focus never wavered, and they understood the silent communication. Emily adjusted the leash of her dog, who seemed to sense the weight of the moment, tilting its head, alert and responsive. A soft hum filled the air, subtle but insistent, vibrating through the boards beneath their feet. Hannah felt a shiver pass through her, a mix of awe and tension, realizing that some things in the world existed on edges humans rarely notice. The figure slowly receded toward a shadowed corner, Madala fading, but leaving an impression of intent and significance. The man motioned for them to follow back to the staircase, a calm authority guiding their steps. Each of them processed the encounter differently: fear, curiosity, wonder. But the bond between them strengthened, a shared acknowledgement of a reality beyond ordinary perception. Back on the ground floor, the light had shifted, and the warehouse appeared less imposing. The figure was gone, yet its presence lingered in the echo of the space and in the subtle tightening of the air. Hannah exhaled slowly, her muscles relaxing for the first time in hours. Daniel's hand brushed hers, a quiet reassurance, and Emily whispered something to her dog, both finding comfort in familiar connections after the uncertainty. The experience left a lasting impression, a reminder that the world was wider and stranger than it seemed, and that courage was not absence of fear, but moving forward with awareness and companions by your side. As they stepped out into the open air, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the empty streets. Hannah felt a mix of relief and lingering curiosity, her mind replaying every detail, every flicker of movement. Daniel and Emily shared quiet words, their presence grounding, and the memory of the figure in the warehouse remained vivid. A reminder of vigilance and the subtle balance between the seen and unseen. They walked on together, carrying the awareness that the world held mysteries waiting to be acknowledged, each step a measured return to ordinary life while leaving space for wonder. Hannah had expected a quiet afternoon at the Riverside Park, a break from the constant noise of her apartment. But the moment she stepped onto the narrow path along the water, a strange chill ran through her. Daniel walked a few steps behind her, casually adjusting his backpack, while Emily trailed behind, her eyes scanning the tall reeds and shadows that flickered in the late afternoon sun. The gentle sound of water lapping against the shore felt normal, yet the atmosphere carried an unspoken tension, an unease she couldn't shake. As they followed the winding trail, an old boathouse came into view, its wood weathered, paint flaking in layers that hinted at decades of neglect. Hannah hesitated at the threshold, noticing subtle movements inside, shadows that did not belong to the swaying reeds outside. Daniel stepped closer with a calm expression, signaling her to follow while keeping Emily in sight. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and moss, grounding yet unfamiliar, making every step feel heavier. Inside, the dim light revealed scattered objects, long-forgotten oars and tangled nets, their shapes distorted in the gloom. Suddenly, a figure emerged at the far end, neither threatening nor friendly, just present, as if it had always existed in the space. Hannah's heart beat faster, a mixture of fear and curiosity tightening in her chest, while Daniel instinctively moved closer, placing a steadying hand near her shoulder. Emily shifted her stance, alert but composed, her dog at her side watching the figure with cautious intelligence. The presence seemed to ripple through the air, subtle but undeniable, pulling their attention toward the center of the boathouse. The figure did not advance, but maintained its position, its outline wavering slightly as sunlight filtered through the cracked boards above. Hannah felt the urge to step forward, to acknowledge the presence, yet hesitation held her in place, every nerve alert. Daniel whispered observations, subtle gestures, and Emily followed the cues, moving cautiously to surround the area without confrontation. Their senses heightened, noticing the smallest details. A shadow shifting independently of light, the faint rustle of a loose board, a sudden drop in temperature that made hair stand on end. Then, with a movement almost imperceptible, the figure drifted toward a stack of old crates, drawing attention to a small, dust-covered chest tucked into the corner. Hannah felt a tug in her mind, a mixture of apprehension and fascination, realizing that this entity was guiding, not threatening. Daniel exchanged a glance with the man who had helped them before, both understanding the silent communication, the need to follow without provoking. Emily crouched slightly, dog obediently at her side, ready to respond to any sign of change. Hannah approached, each step deliberate, muscles tense but controlled. The chest's lid creaked faintly under her hand, and inside lay a collection of objects that seemed mundane at first, but carried an unusual weight. Faded letters, small trinkets, and photographs that hinted at forgotten histories. The figure lingered nearby, as if approving, its form subtly flickering in rhythm with the sunlight. Daniel moved to cover her flank, eyes scanning the darker corners for any additional anomalies, while Emily carefully examined the surrounding space for overlooked details. Time seemed suspended as they explored the boathouse, the figure remaining a quiet companion. A bridge between past and present. Hannah felt a growing sense of understanding, a realization that the entity sought acknowledgement, not fear, and that the small objects carried stories worth attention. The subtle hum of wind through broken boards amplified the tension and focus, binding their senses to every creak and whisper in the room. The man guided them back toward the doorway, when it was clear the encounter had reached its natural pause. A quiet authority leading them without words. Outside, the sun had dipped lower, casting elongated shadows across the riverbank, and the boathouse appeared as a simple structure once more, no longer foreboding. Hannah exhaled, muscles relaxing, and exchanged glances with Daniel and Emily, all three processing the experience in their own ways. The figure was gone, but the sense of awareness lingered. A quiet reminder of vigilance and respect for forces that moved just beyond ordinary perception. The afternoon walk turned into a lesson in presence and curiosity, leaving them with a shared understanding of the delicate balance between the seen and unseen, and the importance of trust, attention, and companionship when navigating the unknown. Hannah had been looking forward to a quiet weekend away from the noise of the city, planning a short trip with Daniel and Emily to explore an old lakeside cabin known for its serene surroundings. The path to the cabin was lined with birch and maple trees, their leaves whispering softly in the afternoon breeze. Hannah adjusted her backpack, feeling the familiar mix of excitement and unease, while Daniel walked beside her, pointing out small details along the trail, and Emily followed behind, alert to every sound. As they neared the cabin, the air grew heavier, carrying the faint scent of damp wood and earth. The structure looked abandoned, yet oddly intact, the windows reflecting dappled sunlight while shadows stretched inside. Hannah hesitated at the doorstep, noticing subtle movements, shapes that did not align with the patterns of light outside. Daniel leaned close, offering a reassuring glance, and Emily crouched slightly, keeping the dog near her side as it sniffed at the door. The three of them stepped inside together, the creak of old floorboards echoing in the quiet room, each step feeling like a careful negotiation with the space. The interior was a jumble of old furniture and forgotten items, yet something felt alive, a presence that was neither hostile nor welcoming. Hannah's pulse quickened as her gaze fell on a rocking chair that moved slightly on its own, though no breeze stirred the room. Daniel moved to her side, quietly guiding her attention to subtle details. A photograph leaning against a shelf, the edge of a torn curtain brushing the floor, and a faint glimmer that seemed to hover near the ceiling. Emily scanned the room calmly, her dog standing close, ears pricked toward the movement that Hannah could barely comprehend. Hannah felt drawn to a narrow hallway leading to a small study. The temperature dropped slightly as she approached, a chill that made her skin tingle, but did not scare her, only heightened her awareness. Daniel and Emily flanked her, moving with measured steps, their shared attention forming a protective presence as they entered the study. Inside, a cluster of old books and papers lay scattered, some open to pages that appeared freshly turned despite the cabin's abandoned appearance. The presence lingered at the corner of her vision, more perceptible than tangible, guiding her without urgency or threat. A sudden rustle drew their focus to a low cabinet tucked against the wall, and Hannah noticed a set of letters tied with a faded ribbon. She knelt, hands trembling slightly as she untied the bundle, revealing messages that hinted at past lives and stories long forgotten. Daniel crouched nearby, scanning the shadows for any movement, while Emily observed quietly, dog alert and watchful. The letters seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, a connection to the cabin and the lingering presence that had silently observed them. Hours passed as they explored the study and surrounding rooms, the presence moving gently around them, never obstructive, never threatening. Hannah felt a mixture of apprehension and curiosity, realizing that the spirit seemed to want recognition rather than fear. Daniel pointed out a hidden drawer in the desk that contained more trinkets and photographs, each item suggesting a personal history, a narrative waiting to be acknowledged. Emily remained vigilant, occasionally adjusting the dog's position, ensuring that they were ready for any sudden change, yet the atmosphere remained calm, almost instructive. Eventually, the presence receded, leaving the room bathed in the soft light of late afternoon, the shadows settling back into ordinary patterns. Hannah exhaled, muscles relaxing, and shared a quiet smile with Daniel and Emily, each understanding the subtle lesson of the cabin. The experience left them with a sense of vigilance and respect for the unseen, an awareness of forces that exist quietly alongside the world they know. They stepped outside, the air warmer, carrying with them a new appreciation for subtlety and attentiveness, and the unspoken bond